If you expect to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright, leave now. Those were the first words that I ever heard as a college student. Admitted to the School of Architecture, attending orientation with my parents, a senior administrator got up in front and said to a room full of 200 freshmen, future architects, and our parents, if you expect to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright, leave now. A questionable student retention tactic even then. Had it been a Simpsons episode, we surely would have heard the rear door slam. But as The Simpsons wouldn't be invented for another 10 years, nobody moved. Next, the administrator said the 9 most important words I ever heard. Only 3 of you will ever design a building. I wasn't sure exactly what to do with that. I wasn't sure if I would be able to handle that. And so I wondered whether, maybe it's because we didn't wear shoes, that we would somehow be able to deal with that. But I knew I wanted to become an architect. I knew I wanted to design buildings. And I grew up in a split-level house in the suburbs, so designing buildings was not going to be the most natural thing I would expect myself to do. Living in a split-level house in the suburbs was the architectural equivalent for me of living in a van by the side of the river. I came from neither money nor good taste. And we clearly didn't know any architects. In your careers, you'll spend 5 years sitting at a desk and 2 years sitting in meetings. Nobody goes into architecture to sit in meetings. Yet apparently that's what all but 3 of us had signed up for, what all but 3 of us would get to do with our careers. Architecture students are a confident and resilient bunch. Every one of them must have thought that they would be one of the 3. And yet we didn't all go on to design buildings. Some became technical architects, some became managers. The ones with MBAs, they became our clients. And the rest went on to other fields. And so at my first career crossroad, I chose the design of buildings over meetings. And for a career, 30 plus years, I got to do what I love. And in all that time, I never had a bad day. And while I never became Frank Lloyd Wright, I became someone even more important for me to become, myself. And I got to do this because at each subsequent career crossroad, I again and again chose the design of buildings over meetings. I got to do this because not designing buildings, not acting on our world, not making a positive contribution, not adding value was for me unimaginable. And as importantly, not designing buildings, well, that was somebody else's life. And as long as I remembered this and acted on it, everything would work out. And it did, both creatively and financially. And it can for you as well. You can be one of the 3. You can be one of the 3 that designs buildings. You can be one of the 3 that creates an innovation. You can be one of the 3 that experiences meaning and purpose in your work. You can be one of the 3 that makes a difference. You can be one of the 3 that helps to transform the world. And yet there comes a time in most careers, for some sooner, some later, we no longer see ourselves as one of the 3. Why is that? Why do we give up on our promises and dreams? For some, we'll end up working for money, and we'll work for a paycheck. For others, we'll become bored, frustrated, and dissatisfied with our work. Our dreams change. We forget our dreams. We give up on our dreams, and sometimes our dreams give up on us. During an internship, I designed my first building before I graduated college and realized very quickly that I had achieved my dream of being one of the three. Michelangelo said, the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and we miss it, but that it's too low and we reach it. Our dreams, in other words, are too small. They're too easily achieved. They're not enough to sustain a long and fulfilling career. So what does it take to sustain a long, fulfilling career? I decided to find out. And I treated my career as an experiment. And in that experiment, I would do two things. I would always have two careers, and I would change one of them every 7 years. Think of your two careers as majors and minors. You always have a minor to go along with your major, and change your minor every 7 years. It turns out, in order to have a long, successful career, you need to have a bunch of shorter, successful careers. And I think of it as the 7-year career. Most careers look like this, which really means they look like this. We all know people like this. If you think of careers in terms of meals, most careers are all meat and no potatoes. Instead, think of your career as having a main dish and a side dish, a main career and a side career. I wanted a well-balanced career. And so I wanted to major in salmon and minor in broccoli. Hey, if it works for nutrition, why not for our careers? Now, I knew a couple things. I didn't want sequential careers like this or like this. And I certainly didn't want sequential careers like this. So I decided to have concurrent careers. And yes, sometimes those careers were very, very concurrent. While I've not written a play in over 20 years, a day does not go by when I don't use something that I learned from being the time I was a playwright. You can think of your careers as micro-careers. You can think of them as micro-brews, but in terms of your life's work, not beer. And you have to think of each of them in terms of 7 years, not in terms of dabbling with one thing one day and another the next. I know in my own career, that when I wasn't able to design buildings due to the economy or a fickle client, that it didn't bother me in any way because I was able to write plays on the side. One creative outlet helped relieve the other until building design picked up again. You can think of your two careers as puzzles. Your main career is one puzzle, and your second side career as another puzzle. And you would think that would just mean you're adding 2 lines to your resume and doing twice as much work. But that's actually not the case at all. Actually, what happens when you have two careers, they interact with each other, and it's much closer to alchemy. What happens when you have two careers side by side like this, it's like taking your puzzle pieces made up of your skills and interests, your passions, and your talents, and you're taking them apart. And then you put it back together again, forming something new and more impactful. And what you're really doing is you're creating a better version of your former self. And when you do this every 7 years, well, you're making sure that you're constantly evolving, improving, and transforming throughout your career. So why 7? Well, beyond the 7 days of creation, our skin regenerates every 7 years. The cells in our bodies renew every 7 years. We're essentially a new person every 7 years. When we land to lie fallow every 7th year, it returns moisture and nutrients to the soil, restoring productivity. As a professor, it takes 7 years to achieve tenure and 7 years to earn a sabbatical. There's the 7th inning stretch, and the 7-year itch. But there's an even more compelling reason why you wait 7 years. Most people have a very difficult time looking 7 years into the future. Represented and demonstrated by this career timeline exercise I do with my students every semester, where I have them take a timeline and they put birth on one end and the proverbial milk truck on the other, and I ask them to place their career milestones, their goals, anywhere along this timeline. So they place their passing exams, graduating, finding a job, falling in love, getting married, finding a home, starting a family, starting a business, gaining recognition. And time in, time out, they end up placing their milestones and goals within the first 7 years. And I don't really blame them. It's very hard to see into the future. Seeing even a decade into the future is really difficult. The future is fuzzy. Creating a career is a lot like writing. E.L. Doctorow said that writing a novel is a lot like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the entire trip that way. Careers are long. It helps to break them up into chunks. And to break them up into chunks, it helps to look at your careers as a succession of sigmoid curves, where each chunk is an arc. And you start off learning a new subject. And you gradually get better at it, better and better, and you improve to the point where you become an expert. And then suddenly you peak, and you no longer are working as effectively as you did before. And sometimes you become bored with what you're doing. And you're thinking about what's the next thing that you could jump off onto. What you should be doing is looking ahead and finding that spot of an interest area that you can jump off onto again, and where you can improve in that. The secret is knowing where that inflection point occurs, represented here by these crossroads. Ideally, you would jump off at that sweet spot, but it's really difficult to know where the inflection point is. Very often, you don't know until, in retrospect, you look back, and you say, I should have jumped off much earlier. So what I decided to do is to jump off and start a new interest every 7 years. As an architect, I like to think of our career path as a concrete sidewalk. This is the walk that I've made every day for 20 years to and from the train in my neighborhood. Overall, I've made this walk 6,000 times. For those with keeping score with Fitbits, that's 60 million steps. Now, sidewalks aren't made in one long ribbon, so why should our careers be? Let's look a little more closely at that career path. It's not quite as smooth and level as it's made out to be. Our careers are built over roots and rocks and utilities. Metaphorically, what are the roots that we're building our careers over? Ever-shifting technological changes, fickle clients, unpredictable economy. We're building the foundations of our careers over roots. A dirty little secret I share with my architecture students is that all concrete cracks. Every day we're contending with these microscopic cracks. And our careers, just like our concrete sidewalks, need to accommodate them. We do this by introducing career control joints. And without them, what happens is we have cracks, these microscopic cracks in our careers that occur due to becoming bored with our work, losing interest in what we're doing. Somebody tries to steal our position, an emerging professional. We place ourselves out of positions due to our salaries, and cracks form in our careers. And sometimes we try to mask our cracks in our careers and try to hide them. Crack what crack? There's no crack here. There's no one here but our spurs. And sometimes when we can't control the cracks in our lives, they take over. This is a career path where we were unable to control the cracks in our careers. This is your career on cracks. But because of these career control joints that we can introduce in succession, let's look at it a little more closely. What you do here when you have these induced cracks, you put a saw-cut seam in your concrete sidewalk, inducing a crack. Cracks no longer occur in random locations. They occur where you want them to go. You're controlling them. And in that way, a control joint becomes a career control joint in our career paths. And so I decided to introduce such a career control joint every 7 years. So before we leave, let me leave you with this. If you're working on one career, start planning for your next, either once your current one plays out or to run alongside it. Careers are long. To assure yours remains that way, do these two things. Always have 2 careers and change one of them every 7 years. You change your side career every 7 years to avoid an existential crisis midway through your career, to keep from becoming complacent and bored, to keep from falling behind and becoming obsolete, and to keep from falling into the trap of living someone else's idea of who you are. You can look at having 2 careers 2 ways, either as an unfortunate economic and social reality, or as an opportunity to expand your meaning and purpose and possibility in your lives. When you change your side career every 7 years, you're in essence, with each iteration, creating a better version of your former self, assuring that you're always evolving and improving, always doing what you love. And doing what it takes to sustain a long and fulfilling career. And while you may never become Frank Lloyd Wright, there's someone even more important that you will become. You. Thank you.